Thank you so very much. First of all, thank you to the Clinton School of Public Service. This is a wonderful community event, and it's one of those little cherries that we get to put ourselves into in the state of Arkansas. That this school exists is a wonderful cornerstone for the state of Arkansas, so thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being interested in film. Tonight, I get the honor of having a conversation with someone whom I've come to respect and know over the course of several years now. If you don't know Jay Roewe, you're going to get a glimpse tonight of somebody who, first of all, is of the highest integrity. And it's very important. A lot of people think that the film industry is full of snakes and sharks. It's not, but oftentimes we meet those people who are ever so genuine and pleasant, and like I said, just filled with integrity. Jay is the Senior Vice President for West Coast Production, and he'll explain a little bit of that this evening. And first off, I want to say, everybody give Jay Roewe a hand for being here in the state of Arkansas.
Thank you.
So, we've been talking for the past, now 5 or 6 years, and have really gotten to know each other over the course of that time. And not a lot of people know what HBO truly is and how it started. And so, Jay, can you give us just a little background before we get into all of the juicy stuff about the history of HBO? You know, maybe it's how it was formed, where it started, and then kind of where it's ended up.
Sure. And I also want to say, just as an intro, when Skip asks you in the true Arkansas fashion, you can't say no to Skip. So there was no question when I came over here and was introduced. I was like, I'm absolutely coming back. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons that we're here, and I'm happy to be here, is that the Arkansas spirit I had never experienced before. We'd had a number of conversations about bringing shows here, and we're so happy to be here filming True Detective. And it is the Arkansas charm and spirit has won me over and caught me, and it's infectious, and it is truly affecting our show right now. And one of the reasons I wanted to be here tonight was to share a little bit about HBO, but to also say thank you to everybody here. And when we do a production, when we come to town and we work on our productions all around the world, what we so look for, and Chris, as you know, the experience of making a production is, it's not just people on a set making the film. There's a big machine behind that. And as we come to town, what we have found is when we find a place that wants us and that is welcome, and that the crew feels good, it becomes part of the filmmaking process. And in success, it's a collaborative. What we work in is a collaborative business. And so what I enjoy so much at this point in my career is really looking for the right place and home for every one of our productions. And when you can find the right place and home, as in any home that one likes to go to, it becomes a very positive experience. And that is what's happening right now in True Detective. So we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight. But I just wanted to say thank you for everybody here, and it's been wonderful, and it's why I'm here. And when we do these productions, we don't come to town for just a week or two. We're here filming for 6 months. We've been in prep for over 6 months. We talked about this production for a number of years. You and I have been in conversations for years, so there was a lot of behind the scenes and work and energy to get us to this point. So I just wanted to kind of start by saying thank you. A little bit about HBO, and then we're going to run a little bit of a tease that way. But, you know, most people at this point, everybody, I think HBO has been in the culture. It's in the zeitgeist. People, HBO... and it's interesting, even my sons who have kind of grown up with HBO, whereas when I was born, there wasn't any HBO. And actually, it was funny enough, I was actually in high school, as I look back now and realize that HBO started in 1972, which sounds like a long time ago. And, you know, in many senses, HBO's been around here for a long period of time. It wasn't on the radar the way that it is now. But the thing that we were talking about a little bit today, you know, HBO started as an innovative idea at the time, and when you look at what's happening in our society today around technology and so on and so forth, and new ventures, It was a very risk-taking adventure. It involved some very entrepreneurial people deciding to look at this new technology, satellite distribution. What sounds interesting today? Like over-the-top internet distribution, right? And they said this is a new way to exploit things, and decided to take a risk, and they went around to the movie studios looking for content and said, well, what about another way of getting this content into people's homes? That sounds interesting. Sounds like something that's going on again today, right? But many, many years ago. And the idea of actually taking these movies after they'd run in the theaters, right? And this is, even talking VHS pre-bed, I mean, how do you exploit the
movie channel, HBO,
exactly.
Showtime,
how do you exploit the life of this? And so the idea is put it up on the satellite. So HBO went around to all the movie studios and said, you know what? After it's in the theater, what else can we do with it? Well, what if we pay you? There's nobody else offering you this money. We pay you money, and we're gonna license these films for 2, 3, 4 years, and give people a way to watch it in their homes. And they were on the cutting edge. And I think that's something that's always been very interesting about HBO. When I talk about the culture, which is what always attracted me to HBO, was the culture, this idea of risk-taking, trying something new and innovative, entrepreneurial, sounds very creative, and taking that risk and kind of going for it.
And so you said that it started off as bringing the films to the household. When did HBO start to transition into original content?
Well, again, in terms of content and getting things in your home, whether it be a channel or a station, you want, as opposed to content that's out there, you want to bring some sort of significance, something that's extra special. And so the idea, well, we're doing very well with all these movies. What if we give something from a subscription standpoint, trying to, again, to think of ways to get people to think about why you want to subscribe to something, because maybe they've seen most of the movies in the movie theaters. Well, what about if you give them something else that they haven't seen anyplace else, that you can only get if you subscribe to HBO? So you're thinking about ways to market, how to grow this product. What about some original programming? So what about a polka festival in Pennsylvania?
That was the
first original program on HBO.
Did anybody see the Polka Festival in Pennsylvania?
No.
Well, there's one to go back and catch. Oh, we have one person up.
Right.
Who doesn't enjoy a good polka, huh?
So in terms of original programming, the idea was, what can we do pretty easily? What can we grab? And so the idea of going out and doing sports programming, again, things were already live that you basically just had to set up the cameras and capture, but maybe capture in a slightly different, special way. So boxing during the 80s was very popular, so that became a real home in what many, when you look at boxing now, thinking of almost the heyday, right, in terms of some really prestigious, fighters, the days of Mike Tyson and so on and so forth. Also, for those that remember Wimbledon, we carried Wimbledon for many years. A very high-end sporting event and so on and so forth. You could only use you're going to see it on HBO. No commercials, get to watch it uninterrupted and so on. And around that time, television movies were very popular on the major networks. And the idea of, well, what about the television movie? But is there something maybe a little bit different we can do than what's on the regular networks? And because we're not regulated by the FCC, well, we can take some liberties. And there's no commercials. So we can make a television movie that's almost like a feature film. And so the idea of doing subject matter, this may be a little bit different, a different point of view, maybe a slightly harder hitting subject, and so on. And so in the late 80s, we started to make our own films. And because we did them a little bit differently and decided we want to work with some really high-end filmmakers, the idea, we started to win awards. And so we're going to start to talk about the programming a little bit more, but why don't we give just a little bit of a taste of HBO right now, and then I can really talk about the programming from that standpoint.
How many of you, and I'm just curious, how many of you in here are subscribers of HBO? Wow, okay. You're several of 40 million. Great. So, yeah, okay.
So we're going to take these are a couple of reels. We put reels together all the time to market what we're doing. The first one we're going to see is a little bit of kind of a flavor reel. We call more to kind of entice people. And then the second one is upcoming product.
In watching that, and I just have to say, as a fan, one thing that sticks out about HBO is that every single production is top notch. I mean, everything they do is quality, and I think that first of all, it's a testament. Jay is one of the employees who has the most longevity at HBO, and we can talk about that here in just a little bit. But Jay helped build this company, and it is a company and it's a business for them. But they built it so that they could produce top-notch quality content, and they put everything that they do into making sure that the most quality product gets put in our hands. And you're starting to talk a little bit about, how all of that came about for original programming, and I want to go back for just a little bit because you actually worked at HBO for a while before you really worked at HBO.
Right,
So
and the reason I played that right there is I was just, the original programming at HBO, about the time I got there, when it really started to blow up. And it was interesting in terms of my own career, because originally I started, and Chris and I have shared this before, I mean, I grew up as a musician, and my parents were amateur musicians, my mother was a teacher who loved teaching. But the creative process was kind of intriguing to me. And when I got to the end of high school, I was like, musicians, I don't know, can you really make a living? I love doing it, and so on and so forth. But it was a very timely time. My mom encouraged me to go to a school, and communication schools, this whole media thing was growing. And so I decided, I ended up at Boston University, which is a great communication school, but also had a good music school. So continued my music. But I had the chance of making a documentary in college, and the creative process, it was like, whoa, this reminds me of music. I love this, people coming together and making something happen. And I remember reading some economic reports about the media industry and how it was going to grow over the next 20 years. So why not have a job that's a growing industry, right? As opposed to being a starving artist or so on. I mean, it's the same. I have a son right now who's a computer science major, and the idea of the job availability for that is a wonderful thing. But the idea of having a job that was creatively oriented, there's something about that creative process. And I've always been attracted to the creative process and making high quality, whatever the creative thing that I'm doing. So upon graduating, I worked in Boston for a few years, moved to LA, worked on music videos, which was a great combination of my music and my production background. But when I was in Boston, I had the opportunity one time, there was this company, HBO, that was doing a Harlem Globetrotters sporting event, and they needed some people to do some B-roll. B-roll is when you're doing a story, often you need other pictures, other elements to combine with the main subject matter that you have. It's not the main subject, but it's side photography and so on. So we're running through the hills of Massachusetts and shooting this B-roll and lugging these machines around. And we come back and we go to lunch. And it was the best catered lunch I'd ever have. And I was like, who's this HBO? They know how to feed a crew. That's really important. That's special. I've never worked on a show that understood that and appreciated that. Years later, when I was a line producer, the first person that I called when I was putting my crews together was the caterer, because I knew that was really important to the crew.
The film business, a happy stomach, happy crew. And so, yes.
So moved to LA and started doing music videos, which was wonderful for me. And I ended up working with a very successful music video director who happened to be very good at live concerts. So good that when Billy Joel wanted to go to Russia for HBO, he got the phone call to come to Russia and produce a special for HBO. I was his line producer, so I got the call as well.
And you might explain line producer to...
Yeah, the line producer, and this is really what my background is, it is in the production department that I work in right now and head up. The line producer is best way to think about it, is the general contractor for the film. Mm-hmm. And so in business terms, if you think of somebody presenting a business, that script being a business, and somebody needs to put a plan together to make that business. So you're going to figure out where you're going to make that film, you got to put a budget together, you got to hire the crew. do everything around all those elements of the financial aspect of realizing the vision of that. That's the line producer.
Each budget has a line item, and you can kind of correlate the two to.
So you need to figure, how to do that. So that's what we do, and so it's probably one of the most important behind the scenes jobs, because you are the center of everything that's going on, and you have to understand the vision. You have to know what it's going to cost to make that, how many people you need to hire, where you're going to make the film, and so on and so forth. So in my job now, when we get a script from the creative department, either I working with my finance department or a line producer, we have to figure out where in the entire world, Arkansas, South Africa, the UK, where we are going to make that television series or film. And we're doing right now around 40 of those projects around the world. And we will probably get a script every week or two. And so every couple weeks, we're having to come up with a new plan of where we're going to do that.
And you started as a line producer in that regard.
Right.
Talk about the transition, and then what brought you onto HBO full-time?
So as I went to Russia and worked again on this really high quality production with people that really knew what they were doing, I was like, these HBO people, there's something they're not like the other studios I work with. So after coming back from that, I had a chance to go back to Russia again with HBO with Billy Crystal, Midnight Train to Moscow. And when I came back from that, again, I was doing other projects, but I did 2 more films at this point, television movies for HBO. And then I get a phone call one day and said, well, what do you think about coming and working for HBO? And I've been approached about this in-house job a couple times before. I was always resistant. I love the gypsy lifestyle. I love traveling around the world. Very exciting to have people, to literally see the world, and people are paying you to do that. And again, when you go to make a project, you're not just showing up the way a tourist would or somebody. You have to get along with the people. You have to understand the community. You have to be working with, we come to town, we're hiring hundreds of people. We're working with hundreds of businesses. We are it's a very dynamic environment that we're working in. As the governor, when he went to the set today, to walk around and see the hundreds of people and to see the row upon row of wardrobe, thousands of pieces of wardrobe and thousands of pieces of set dressing. These are big business operations, and until you see that, people don't always understand what's going on behind the camera. So after working with HBO a few times, I said, and we just had our first son. I told my wife, we'd been in town. I did 2 shows in a row in LA, and I was like, I'm gonna have to leave town again. I said, well, let me try this HBO thing. And came inside of HBO, and when I was freelance, I'd have to read 20 scripts, and maybe one was good. Well, when I was sitting at my desk at HBO, script after script was really good. And I think in any business, when you get to work with high-quality people and a high-quality product, it's a really special and wonderful opportunity. And in many ways, I just feel lucky to have gotten to HBO at the pivotal time in the history of the company, and to be with high-quality people doing high-quality work and continuing to have to aspire that year after year. Subscription-based business, you're only good as the people who put down the subscription year after year. So you have to keep outdoing yourself, right? Much less in a competitive business arena the way we are today. So HBO at that point, with the films, started to look into the future. Well, what else can we do? What else can we do? We then moved into miniseries. Shows like Band of Brothers, John Adams, Rome. And then towards the end of the 90s, it was clear that series, the thirst for content, which now is so pervasive, were really a good way to go for us from a business standpoint. Because if you make a movie, it's one thing. When you make a series that's recurring, it brings people back time and time and time again. And so the idea of doing that, which to sustain things, and also that people were willing to look at something more than 2 hours if you had the right kind of subject matter to go on this longer journey. And so we really started to push, and I think also because of that risk-taking environment. So a show like Sopranos, which I remember going to the first premiere and sitting there and people were looking like, what is this? You barely could understand what was going on, but you knew it was different, you knew it was special, but trying to figure it out. And as, I don't know if people remember, it took a couple of years for people even understanding, accept Sopranos, which then you look back and you realize the kind of cutting edge show that it was. But that, again, that was in our culture to take those kinds of chances. So about 10 years ago, as the film division, I was heading the film division at the time, we were deciding, where are we going with the company? And you could see the series expanding and expanding. I went into my boss and I said, we're doing less movies and you're doing a lot more series. Don't you, we have all this experience in films and miniseries. Would you let us do a TV series? Let us try a TV series. And, and as in corporate things, I've learned to be patient and, be persistent but patient and pleasant. And so a year and a half later, finally, Michael Lombardo at the time said, well, we have this series. We've never done anything like this. So he was like, wonder what that means. But, why don't you guys give it a shot? And that was Game of Thrones.
Which is 10 years ago, and that's hard to believe. But the chance on the series was Game of Thrones.
Right. So the idea of doing this kind of sci-fi, futuristic, old, way outside the box, what we'd ever done before. But what was interesting about it, and as we were talking a little bit, Chris, today, as opposed to a traditional TV series, because of the background of the group of people that I was working with, our background were films and miniseries. Very high quality, but films and miniseries, not a traditional television series. And so when you look at Game of Thrones now and you see what it has become, you actually think about it. And again, in the same way that Sopranos was cutting edge at the time in terms of television and what television series were doing, Game of Thrones was really the first one out of the park of high-end television.
Yeah. Cinematic
right,
episode.
Theatrical filmmaking on a television level. Or a television schedule, should I say. So it's, you're almost making one movie a week. And the writers had never done television at all, only films. My group had worked on films. We hired the top film line producer in Europe at the time. We had a gentleman who'd been working on many projects with us who was a creative producer that way. And then we also had the extraordinary luck of having a woman who'd been running the television series division at HBO. She had just transitioned out of an executive job to be able to work independently. And these people came together with David and Dan, the show writers, who had never done television. And David had a couple of film credits. And they said, well, how do we do this? And fortunately for everybody, they were, in the collaborative nature of our business, they were very open to listening to people. And so we surrounded them with some of the best people in the business, and they kept listening and being the smart people that they were and are, started to succeed. And the rest is history a little bit, and there's a long journey which we can dabble on, but it's been a pretty amazing
It is a long journey, and I
experience.
think that there are most people in here are going to want to know, and we're going to get to it. We're going to get to some questions towards the end of this as well for Jay. But so you guys chose to do this location-based as well, and you chose to do it, non-studio production, because when you look at the scope of something like Game of Thrones, you would think that, gosh, it needs to be all on soundstage, and today's world you could probably do that, but you chose to base this in Belfast.
Mm-hmm.
And so, can you talk a little bit about that decision, and then how that's evolved
when we get a script, and part of my job and the people I work with is to say where in the entire world, and that's what happens these days because it's a global world we're working in, and we have the possibility of films everywhere around the world, where is the best place to make that project, set up that business? And so the first thing you look at is creatively what's on the page. Well, Game of Thrones it's a fantasy world. But even then, it's based in some sort of reality, and the idea of looking at England and Scotland and that part of the world where somewhat the roots of some of the Game of Thrones legacy is from seemed like a logical place. At the same time, we looked at Eastern Europe, we looked at New Zealand, Lord of the Rings had been down there, Australia, we looked at British Columbia, Vancouver. We were looking at places, though, And we do look at this where there is some infrastructure, because if you're going to go there and set something up, and in success, a television series is going to last 3 to 5 years. And so people need to be willing to live there for that period of time, and there needs to be the support around there, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, and also what things cost, and so on and so forth. So based on a project like that, we did 4 or 5 different budget analysis. And typically these days we do 3 or 4. Sometimes I have a project right now I'm shooting in South Africa where we did 10 different budgets around the world to decide that South Africa was the right place to shoot it. We go through that process of bringing those elements together and look at things creatively. And in the case of Game of Thrones, there were also some other financial things that were very positive at that time. There was also a government. This is a time when Belfast and Northern Ireland was still trying to change their image a bit. And the idea of a film coming, I mean, a successful film and television series can really put a place on the map, right? Because you're showing what it is. In the same way, very similar to the reason why we're here doing True Detective. You know, the story is based here in Arkansas. We would love to be able to film here in Arkansas, and we work very hard with you to make it possible for us to film here. The same thing happened on Game of Thrones. And so the government got behind us. We actually worked with them on some film incentives, which we were able to put in place. And we found a community that was open and welcoming to us. And it's funny, in the same way that I was picked up with an Uber driver yesterday who told me about wanting to be on the set of True Detective as an extra, was very excited. He didn't get a chance, but he hopes to be asked back. In Belfast right now, Northern Ireland, if you go into Belfast right now as a tourist, you can walk into literally every single store and every single restaurant and every single hotel, and they have experienced Game of Thrones. It is completely transformed. It's transformed the city, and it's literally transformed the country.
Well, it's transformed their economic base as well. You guys have spent a pretty nickel there.
Right.
And, the impact of a production that now is in its 8th season on a community. And Belfast isn't huge, but it has done amazing work for the community. And perhaps you can talk a little bit about that too.
So again, in success, and now when we are looking at doing these projects, we really do look around to where the best place is to do that. And that's why relationships such as you and what I do in terms of traveling around the world and meeting with people, so that when I have something that happens to show up on the desk, and I start that exploratory process, I can pick up the phone, as I did to Chris, and say, we'd had a project a few years ago, we didn't end up here, but we went through a process together. What do you think, Chris? And in the case of Arkansas, True Detective, a very successful series with Nic Pizzolatto, and the idea of coming to here where he'd gone to school, the story is set here. If there was any way that we could make it happen, we'd love to be here. And we worked very, very closely together, working with the governor to allow us to come here. And we've been welcomed with open arms. And it's an extremely positive experience for us at the moment. And as we've been chatting with people, there are people in the crew now that have actually talked about wanting to potentially move here. And it's a very, 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 very strong relationship that way. And in success, unfortunately, True Detective, the way that this series works, it's only, we do one series at a time, and it's not an ongoing series. There may be another episode, but it wouldn't necessarily be related to this. So unfortunately, in the case of this, with this success, the next True Detective, who knows where he's going to set it from that standpoint. But in success, it is a long-term relationship. And what we're hoping here is, this will be one of the biggest shows on HBO next year. It is the largest television series and film, I believe, ever to have been filmed in Arkansas. And the governor has been so proactive. In fact, he was so enthusiastic today. What else can we do to bring more projects like this here? We really do hope to work with you to leave a bit of a legacy here, hopefully to have left a positive experience for everybody, and to get the word out to Los Angeles and filmmakers, everywhere, that this is a good place to come and make this kind of product. And we really hope that.
That's one of the things that I've loved about working with you guys, though, and with you in particular, is because you are community oriented. When you leave Arkansas, you want to leave it better than when you came here. And that's something that you don't always find. It's something that is truly respected on my part. So for those of you who don't know, we have several great film schools in Arkansas. SAU Tech and UCA and John Brown University, and I can go on. And one of the first things that HBO does when they come into a community or to a state like ours is they immediately say, can we set up a PA training program? And so PA being a production assistant. And so that was one of the first glimpses that I had that, okay, my gosh, they're here to make a huge difference, not just a product, but a difference in and a legacy when they leave. And so can you talk to us a little bit about some of those initiatives?
And I think that's the HBO culture again. I think, and it's what I sensed when I first worked there, and it's very powerful now. And that's the idea of, how you treat people, the humanistic side of business, and so on. And so one of the things, and again, new ideas and staying fresh with this. And so one of the things as incentives, which are a big part of our business now, spread around the world and allowed us to do production around the world, we're bringing our business to your town. The same way as Amazon or other people set up. And it's important for us to have this relationship with you. And so what we started to say, well, when we come to these towns, because obviously there's a long history of filmmaking in Los Angeles, New York, and London and so forth, we started going to these other places. What else can we do? And in most corporations, there's a corporate social responsibility department, people that work in community service. But we're bringing a business to your town. Well, we didn't have that set up within HBO. So my corporate social responsibility department actually hired somebody to work with me. Again, this is HBO thinking someone outside the box. So when we come to town, how can we work with you? So obviously we want the collaboration on the set, but we want the collaboration with the community. And further, this is a very growing sector. Filmmaking, media, very, very, very growing. Obviously, there's issues of diversity and training and so on in many aspects of things. So we have an opportunity. We have a set. There's not a better film school than a working set with some of the best people working in the business right down the street. So we now put in every single budget for every project we have, training money. And we have a woman now that we work with out of New Orleans who on the heels of Katrina had set up a program down there. And now we go in and we ask for partnerships in film schools. We have people come onto the sets. We actually set up a program where they get taught how to do things. And actually there have been a couple of instances where people come to PA training program and people so love them, the training program was over, they got hired onto the crew. But we really do believe in this, and I think, again, this is about the HBO culture of wanting to work with people, the idea of collaboration, supporting each other, and it's kind of what that HBO brand is all about, high quality.
It's so refreshing, and I truly am thankful that you guys present yourselves in such a wonderful manner.
Well, and it's why I've been there for 20 years. It's why I work at that company. It's what we do is hard. There's a lot of risk involved with it, but the idea of working at a place that's being supportive and willing to go with you on that kind of risk and keeps it challenging to me. I mean, it's every day.
And I think a lot of people have a misconception as well. HBO's a very small and compact company.
We're only 2,000 people.
2,000 people, but 300?
300 in the Los Angeles office where 80% of the programming comes out of.
So 80% of the programming and content is run by 300 people.
Yep.
That's pretty amazing. I think that a lot of people think that HBO is one of those 10,000 or 50,000 people companies.
The other side of it is if we hire, we have the crew up there. We have about 150 working people on a daily basis up there, and then there's probably a couple more hundred that are hired part-time and extras just on the show here. And then you have post-production people, another couple of, maybe another 100 or so post-production people. So over the course of all of our shows in a given year, we're probably hiring over 10,000 people. And that's how big these shows are, and that's the impact. But you hire them for each, they're hired for this specific show. It's a custom-made business model for that show, and then they're off, and they go into the next show, or we bring them back for the next season. So the machine is pretty big. It's just, it's custom-made. As opposed to having 10,000 people sitting around, well, what do I do now? You bring in the experts, you custom design that show for that particular project.
Right.
But it's, the heart and soul of it is the 300 people. Yep.
As the senior vice president of West Coast Production, can you tell everybody here, day to day, what is it that you truly do? What is your job?
There's really two things now. One of them I've been very close with, and that's dealing with the incentive. So in our business, 10 years ago, less than 20% of our shows had an incentive of one kind or another. And what I mean by an incentive is a rebate or an incentive of some kind that when I go to a particular state or country and say I'm spending $10 million, I'm going to get a form of a incentive in the case of either rebate or tax credit, in simple terms, somewhere between 10 to 20% back, which happens in all businesses. People want your business and so on and so forth. Well, there's close to 40 states that have incentives, and in terms of the countries around the world, probably another 20 to 30 countries that have incentives. So that's a big part of our business. Now, 10 years later, over 80% of our productions have an incentive of one kind or another. In fact, you asked me today what films or projects don't have an incentive. I had to scratch my head.
I'm interested in bringing those here.
Pardon?
I'm interested in bringing those here.
Exactly.
That's why.
Okay, I see. Got it. Right. So I monitor those all around the world for all of our productions. And because they're legislatively driven, they're constantly changing, and there's new opportunities, and so on and so forth. So I'm actually a revenue source to the company, which is kind of fun. But the main part of my job really is, as a former line producer, we have a team of there's 9 of us right now, and then assistants and so on. So it's about a total group of about 40 people. But those 9 people, like myself, most of them former line producers, I get a script every week or two, and I hand it to them. We put a production plan together, and then if it goes into production, we're monitoring every aspect of that production. So for instance, on True Detective, there's a line producer here, Jeremy Smith in Los Angeles. He's talking to his people every single day. And I usually will talk to Jeremy once a day and say, how's True Detective going? And we have that on 40 productions going on around the world. So we have people who are tied into everyone, and I will circle around every day or two, and how are things going? Is there a problem here? And so on and so forth. And lo and behold, yes, there's a problem. Somebody got sick, they didn't show up. And so on and so forth. So you're constantly monitoring those situations, all that, while putting plans together for another 10 to 20 projects in the future.
Right.
Constantly.
And so you and your team, and the creative team as well, you're responsible for choosing. You get the script, and then you say, okay, it's written for such and such, can we go there? Is that one of the first questions?
Well, that would be one of the first questions, but in this day and age, as in any business, what you're trying to do is to find the best business environment. So where's your dollar going to go the most? Where is it going to be cost efficient? Where is the weather going to be okay? Right? I have a summer movie. I can't be shooting someplace where there's snow during the winter. I mean, some common sense sort of things. Or in the case of the project we're shooting in South Africa, get a script. It's 1870s San Francisco. Doesn't exist. Right, San Francisco, but it doesn't look anything like that anymore. So we budgeted 10 different places around the world because we have to build the entire city of San Francisco and all the buildings and so on and so forth. And we ended up in South Africa after all the analysis. So, and then they're down there filming right now, and we need to make sure it was okay. And then we all heard about the fact that there was going to be no water in South Africa. So people are asking us, well, isn't there water? What's going to happen to the crew? I mean, all kinds of things come up. And you're trying to create, and at the end of the day, and the way I really looked at my job early on and what was enthusiastic to me and what continues to drive me this day, we're trying to create the best environment where these artists can do the best work. And so that's creating, for that artist, the filmmakers, a place where they can go and make great art. That's really what I do. That's really what drives me at the end of the day.
You do an amazing job at that. I mean,
I'm part of a team. It is not me. I am part of a great team.
Well, the content speaks for itself. And when you think of HBO, it's the creme de la creme of production. I mean, it truly is. So let's talk about the process of True Detective. And I think what all brought you here, but we can talk about the process from the beginning of and it is a long, arduous process. It's a process of many hours of phone calls and back and forth. And
did it feel arduous to you?
Not every day, but yeah. I mean,
Chris, I mean, this is the nature of our business, is that when you do come together, and it's kind of the fun of it, and I call it the tribe, the group gets together and so on and so forth. I mean, there was a point, Chris, probably last summer, I mean, we were talking almost every day for a number of months. And now it's quite common we talk at least once a week. But the idea of all the little things that have to come together and all those little decisions, are we in the right place? And does everybody want us there? And are the finances going to work? And is the crew base there? Are there other films that are there? And we're looking at other things, but are you going to make, and we haven't been there before, so you can help guide us through this process. I mean, there was a lot of conversation about that. And I think the fact that you, with your knowledge here and what you've created in terms of a film incentive and what in terms of your advocacy for the business, your education to people such as the governor of what the positive things that a business like this can create. I mean, all those things made a really, really big difference. And, you know, even to the point when we first came down here and scattered around and the places you took them to, I mean, it was that kind of sensitivity to what we were doing, which really jumped out at us. And when you're putting any kind of collaborative thing together, you want people that are going to become part of the team, and you became part of the team very early, which was really influential.
Well, I still want some of those non-incentivized productions here, though. So we'll talk about that. But so Nic Pizzolatto, who's the writer, actually has a creative writing degree from the University of Arkansas, and the first series of True Detective was actually written for Arkansas and then changed, and
to Louisiana, because they have a great film incentive down there.
Yes.
And we weren't able to make anything happen here.
That's correct. And then the second one was set in L.A.
In L.A.
And then the third one he had written again for Arkansas. And Arkansas itself is a character in this.
Yeah, and I think in Nic's pieces, the location is a character and almost like an actor. I mean, it's part of the texture, it's part of the architect. The personality of the place actually has a role in the story.
Yeah, and when we say character, it's shown in a very positive light, by the way. The bucolic settings of Arkansas really do come through in this. Can you talk a little bit about what comes after True Detective? And you know, I can talk about it now.
In terms of Arkansas?
So I can.
Well, we've started jamming on this a little bit.
Yeah, and we have some ideas, and we think that some things will happen. But here's part of why I love working with these people as well, and why you as Arkansans should be proud. They've embraced Arkansas. They've had a fantastic experience here. You know, one of the things that Scott Stevens talked about this morning was it is incredible to be able to get off from a 12-hour day in production and be 10 minutes away from home, and be able to then have a couple of hours where otherwise you're stuck in LA traffic for a couple of hours, and it becomes a 14-hour day, and you don't have any personal time afterwards.
Yeah, I think the lifestyle and what people have found here is a very welcoming community. I mean, beautiful places to go, the bike paths. I mean, the things that, you know, make quality of life really nice. I mean, people have discovered that here, and it's kind of like a secret. I don't think people knew about that. And maybe you guys are keeping that a secret, so, you know, more people don't know. But it's pretty remarkable that way. And so, you know, people come to work with a positive attitude, and it's, you know, you're relaxed, and it's a good quality of life. And so I think that as a destination, from the standpoint of other people knowing about that, is a story to be told. The story we talked about where our production office is, where, you know, we were looking for a production office, and I don't know how you found that business owner or how you convinced him, but, you know, he's a bean distributor, isn't it?
So he's a candle maker.
But he was a candle maker.
He had beans that he was distributing for Allen Canning when Allen Canning shut down.
Got it.
And so it was it's 140,000 square foot warehouse.
So you guys had a conversation, so convinced him that it was going to be so great for us to be here that he decided to move his cans across the street.
To his other building. That's
right,
correct.
Exactly. So we could move in. And again, it's that kind of collaboration and so on that people have found here. And that's the kind of stuff that people need to hear about, that there's a welcoming to that, and that people want us here and want to work with us.
As Arkansans, I will say that one of the things that we tend to take a lot of pride in is that we're warm and welcoming. And you know, there's nothing, you know, disingenuous about it. It's just that, you know, there's an old saying, and Gary's sitting in the audience here, and we have a friend, Ray McKinnon, and he said, it's really strange being in a place where people want you to succeed. And that's the way that Arkansans are.
Yes,
and it doesn't,
exactly.
and there really is, there's no agenda. It's, and the production, you know, we heard many people talk about it today when the governor was on set, but the production, I think, has experienced that part of Arkansas that is kind of a secret. And,
Right.
Yeah.
And again, that's what the collaborative artistic creative process is about, right? Is a group of people coming together. There's a vision out there, and you're striving in every way possible to realize that vision. So the more collaborative the environment is, I mean, that's the environment within HBO. I mean, we make it we make it really clear. We are a home for great talent.
Yes.
And even when I do a budget, it's not about doing the film as cheaply as possible. It's about creating a budget that best supports the vision of that project. And at the end of the day, I remember early on I got to HBO, and they said, well, I want to make it for $5 million. And I said, well, it's going to cost you $10 million. Okay, then we're not going to do it. As opposed to trying to do it for $5 million and then it's not any good.
Right.
Or on the other hand, it's going to cost 12. Okay, then if that's what it's going to cost, that's what it's going to cost. Because if we're going to do it, we're going to do it well. It's like, really? Okay. You know, you don't always hear that in business all the time, right? If you're going to do it well, this is what it's going to cost. Got it.
That's right. You do it well, and we're so thankful and proud that you're here. We've got a few minutes left, and we do want to open it up to a couple of questions. If anybody has any questions about HBO and Jay and the process, any specific, we're open to everything. Anyone?
Sure.
Oh.
Start with.
Okay.
Over here? Okay.
Okay. Yes. So recently, I attempted to participate in the Sundance episodic lab, and I did make the next round. But I was just wondering, I'm aware of some, I guess, like partnerships that HBO has, like with the American Black Film Festival and different ones. But do you have like your own that's kind of similar to that, to where not only like, well, I guess in the sense that you're able to get actual feedback to where the artist can go back on and kind of push to develop? Because what I did like about that process, even though I didn't make it as far as that, I wrote about things that I didn't think I need to turn in, besides even the script, like the mission statement behind the whole series and individual things like that. So I was just wondering, did you have any initiatives like that I could look into?
Yeah, we actually, I mean, the creative process is a process, and it's a journey. And what's important if one aspires to be part of that is the sooner you begin to engage in that process, the better. And it's a lifelong journey from that standpoint. So, you know, as a musician who's going to sit and write songs, well, how do you learn how to write songs? You start writing, right? And you're going to learn and learn, and hopefully you learn from great teachers and so on and so forth. So we actually have put together a program called HBO Access, which you can actually go and type in and so on and so forth. And this is a program we've been working on now. We're in our third generation of it. And we have a script submission process. We had 1,000, I believe, it wasn't 1,000, there's 1,000 directors who submitted for it. We have a script process. We pick, I think it's about 10 script writers. They come to LA. We mentor them with the creative department. At the end of that process of about 6 months, then we go out and we put up a submission for directors. We had 1,000 submissions for that. We picked 10 and narrowing it down to 3 people. And we're going to take the scripts that the scriptwriters wrote, the directors that we found. We're going to put them together, and then we're going to mentor them and actually make 3 short films. And we've done this twice already. So what's interesting, the writers, as soon as if they get accepted into the HBO Access program, just by getting into the program, they get an agent. Unbelievable. And then the directors that have gone through the program, all of them, almost all, have gone on to working. Unfortunately, a lot of them have worked at other networks because we didn't have the opportunity for them. But just the HBO brand by getting through that. Sundance is very similar the same way, to be a part of that environment in any way. But you're around quality people, and so you're going to learn from each other. We do participate in a lot of film festivals around the country. ABFF is one of them where we've done a lot of work going down and actually mentoring people and so on and so forth. So we fully believe in this process of mentoring, giving back, and so on. And part of it's selfish. We'd love to find some rising filmmakers, but at the same time, it is what the process is. So, but you should keep an eye on the HBO Access program, and you can submit for it and apply, which would be a wonderful thing. Yep.
I'm really fond of Barry so far.
It's one of my favorite comedy series right now. I mean, it's almost my favorite that's on the air. Thank you. I'm happy to hear that.
I wonder if you might comment on what your thoughts are about the future of HBO in the bigger picture of streaming, the impact of Netflix and Amazon, what your thoughts might be.
Sure. I mean, it's a question that gets asked all the time, and I think what we like to say is, first of all, I mean, good competition makes you better, right? I mean, it's a wide open field right now, and in a sense, we often say that we were almost on our own island 10 years ago. Well, I don't know if there's an island anymore. I think it's a giant space where there's a lot of people. It's changed our business from the standpoint of the competitiveness, the landscape. 5 years ago, there were 250 scripted series. Now there's 500 in the last 5 years. The idea of actually going to places where there's availability of crew, stages, and so on makes my job and the group I work with very challenging these days. At the same time, the experience and the level of production that's going on around the world is at an all-time high, and the quality of what people are making is at an all-time high that way. Certainly from a filmmaker's standpoint, as a filmmaker, you have so many places to go to and sell your product now and so on and so forth. Getting back to the HBO of it all, I think the challenge is how do you differentiate yourself? There's a brand that's sitting there, but then again, with all these other things coming on, how do you differentiate yourself? And I think we've asked that question many times, and sometimes you have to stop and say, well, who are we? What are we about? And what we've kind of come around to, and part of this is instinctive, and sometimes it's just looking around. But I think what Richard Plepler often says is, we want to be best in class. And somebody the other day described, it's like going to a very good shopping mall, and you have lots of places to shop. What's HBO? HBO is the small high-end boutique. And when you walk into that store, you should feel that anything you pick off of any shelf is going to be high quality. It's going to be the A level, the A brand. And that's really the game that we're playing from that standpoint. Netflix, walk down the mall, giant store, lots of things to pick from. There's some gems in there. You're probably going to spend a long time trying to find them, but that may be fine, and that's their play. Their play is not necessarily to be all high-end. Their play is that, like a video store of the old days, you walk in, you're going to find something, and that's why you're going to spend the money every month, because there's going to be something in there that maybe you will be that will work for you. And it's going to be interesting to see with Disney and Fox and Disney pulling their product. I mean, the whole Disney, on Netflix and the kids programming, very important for Netflix. They're going to lose that, which is why they're now moving to their own original programming. But it's a very different business model. I know people that work over there. It's a very different environment to work in over there. So it's an incredible time. But again, how many hours do you have in any given week or month or year to watch programming? How many programs can you watch? And so the idea, I know when I go on the weekend, I want to watch, if I'm going to watch anything, I want it to be worth my time.
So just watch HBO. That's actually what this is.
The idea is you're going to subscribe to HBO because when you go and if you want to watch, it's going to be very high quality. The documentaries, you can watch any one of those documentaries. It's one after another. Is incredibly well done. So
I know we're running out of time. I also want to say we have the very first hire of HBO in Arkansas was a location scout who's in the audience today. So when you see a lot of the locations in True Detective, he's responsible for a lot of them. And that's Mr. Tom Wallace right there.
Oh,
So,
great.
yeah.
thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about Mr. Jay Roewe?
And ladies and gentlemen, how about Mr. Christopher Crane? Thank you all for being here. Great program, great conversation. More questions, I know, just come up and visit with Christopher and Jay. And thank you all for being here, and drive safely on your way home. Thanks.
Thank you, Arkansas. Thank you so much.